January 2026. Satellite imagery over eastern Ukraine lights up with a familiar but deeply unsettling signature. Heavy tracked vehicles, wide launch rails, reinforced armor. Within hours, NATO intelligence confirms it. Russia's TOS-1A heavy flamethrower system has returned to active deployment zones. This is not routine rotation. This is escalation by doctrine. When the TOS-1A appears, it means Russia is preparing to collapse fortified positions quickly, brutally, and decisively. Washington notices, Brussels notices, and both quietly raise alert levels. From Moscow's perspective, this move is not about shock value, it is about efficiency. The TOS-1A is not artillery in the Western sense. It is a thermobaric assault system designed to annihilate entrenched defenses, underground bunkers, urban strongpoints, and trench networks that resist conventional fire. Russia deploys it only when the battlefield demands certainty, when positions must disappear, not degrade. Its reappearance signals that Russian planners believe the next phase of operations requires irreversible pressure. The TOS-1A operates on a simple but terrifying principle. Instead of relying on kinetic penetration, it uses thermobaric rockets that disperse an aerosol fuel cloud before ignition. The result is a massive overpressure wave, followed by extreme heat. Inside bunkers, trenches, and buildings, oxygen is consumed instantly. Reinforced concrete does not protect against pressure. Armor does not shield lungs. This is why NATO categorizes the system separately from conventional rocket artillery. It is a battlefield eraser. Russia learned the value of thermobaric systems long before Ukraine. Chechnya, Syria, urban environments where defenders hide underground and refuse to break. The lesson was consistent. Standard artillery creates craters. Thermobarics remove resistance. That logic now applies to Ukraine's deeply layered defensive belts, trench lines, concrete shelters, forest fortifications, and urban fallback zones. The TOS-1A is not a signal of desperation. It is a tool for shortening timelines. NATO's concern is not theoretical. The system has a limited range, around 6 kilometers, which means it must operate close to the front. That proximity tells intelligence analysts something critical. Russian forces believe local air defense, counter-battery fire, and drone suppression are sufficient to protect these high-value assets. In other words, Moscow believes it has achieved local dominance in key sectors. You do not expose a TOS-1A unless you are confident it will survive long enough to fire. U.S. analysts are particularly focused on what this deployment says about Russian operational confidence. The TOS-1A is slow, heavy, visible, but it does not need to fire often. One salvo can neutralize an entire defensive block. When paired with drones, electronic warfare, and precision artillery, it becomes part of a coordinated system. Suppress sensors, blind defenders, then erase positions. This is combined arms warfare optimized for attrition environments. Russia's messaging around the deployment is deliberately muted. No dramatic announcements, no propaganda videos on day one. That silence is intentional. Moscow wants NATO to draw its own conclusions, and they are unsettling. The reintroduction of TOS-1A suggests Russian planners expect intense close-quarters fighting ahead, particularly in urban and fortified zones where Western-supplied weapons have helped Ukraine slow advances. Thermobarics negate many of those advantages. For NATO, the problem is response. There is no direct counter to thermobaric systems once they fire. Air defense cannot stop rockets launched from 6 kilometers away in seconds. Counter-battery fire often arrives too late. Drone strikes require precise timing and uncontested airspace. The only reliable defense is not being there, abandoning positions before the system engages. That reality forces Ukrainian commanders into a terrible choice: hold ground and risk annihilation, or withdraw and cede territory.
From Russia's strategic viewpoint, this is leverage. Every TOS-1A deployment increases psychological pressure far beyond its physical footprint. Ukrainian units know what the system does. NATO advisors know its history. Even limited use reshapes defensive planning. Trenches become liabilities. Bunkers become death traps. Static defense loses meaning. That forces Ukraine into mobility it cannot always sustain, especially under constant drone surveillance. The United States has responded with heightened intelligence sharing and warnings, but those measures do not neutralize the system itself. Western militaries do not operate an equivalent platform, partly because thermobaric saturation contradicts their doctrinal emphasis on precision and proportionality. Russia does not share that constraint. Its doctrine prioritizes mission completion over optics, especially when facing fortified resistance. This is why the TOS-1A alarms NATO more than many longer-range systems. Hypersonic missiles threaten strategic assets, artillery threatens front lines, but thermobaric launchers threaten the concept of defense itself. They compress decision-making timelines, they punish hesitation, and they reward preemption. In escalation terms, they are destabilizing precisely because they make standing still impossible. Russia's decision to reintroduce the TOS-1A reflects confidence in its logistics and production base. Thermobaric rockets are expensive and specialized. Using them signals that Moscow is willing to expend high-value munitions to accelerate outcomes. That contradicts earlier Western assumptions that Russia would conserve advanced systems. Instead, the pattern now suggests selective but decisive usage. Apply overwhelming force where it matters most. The psychological impact extends beyond Ukraine. NATO planners are watching carefully because the TOS-1A represents a category of warfare that alliance doctrine struggles to counter. In any future confrontation involving fortified positions, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, similar systems would impose immediate costs. The lesson is uncomfortable. Not all battlefield advantages can be offset with technology alone. Russia understands this. That is why the system appears now, not earlier. The battlefield has matured. Defenses are dense. Lines are rigid. This is exactly the environment thermobarics were designed for. The message to NATO is implicit but unmistakable. Escalation does not always mean longer-range weapons. Sometimes it means removing the defender's ability to exist where they stand. The return of the TOS-1A does not mean immediate collapse, but it does mean the margin for error has narrowed. Every fortified position now carries higher risk. Every delay becomes more dangerous, and every assumption about survivability must be reevaluated. From Russia's strategic viewpoint, this controlled escalation, not reckless, not symbolic, functional. The TOS-1A is being used as intended to break resistance, shorten battles, and impose psychological dominance. NATO may raise alert levels, the US may issue statements, but on the ground, the calculus is simple. When the TOS-1A enters the fight, the battlefield stops negotiating. And that is exactly why it matters. If you want daily, no-nonsense breakdowns of the weapons and doctrines actually shaping this war, subscribe now and stay locked in. New analysis drops every single day.